Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Kat Patrick. This is the session entitled Delight Directed Learning in Secondary. And the plan is for me to set out some principles and thoughts with regard to this topic. And then in the second part, which won't probably be the second half, but it will be a later part, there'll be some time for discussion, a sharing of ideas, and some question and answer. But certainly at that time, make suggestions as well. Feel free to talk about your own experience and that sort of thing. It doesn't have to just be Q&A to me. Before I get started, I want to address two elephants in the room, a big one and a little one. First of all, I'm really sad that we couldn't all be together in person in Coventry and meeting like we have in the past, but with the obstacles come opportunities and a chance to talk to many more people via these online sessions than could have made it to Coventry. Plus we have a lot more options. Before we would have to we had only a few sessions and a lot would sort of overlap each other. So this is just brilliant what Juliet has done, and I want to just tell her thank you so much. And want to encourage you all to use the meetup rooms and the Whova app and everything that Juliet has set up for us to connect about this topic, about all kinds of other topics. So big shout out to her to make it happen. And I know you've turned off the chat option right now, Juliet, but just imagine everyone's going, yay, thumbs up, well done, thank you so much, because I'm sure they would if they could. Now the baby elephant in the room is that unlike my normal kind of mode of working, I'm using a script today for this talk, so that's why I'm like looking this way. Sorry about that, but the reason is sort of twofold. One is it's a big topic, and I am really super passionate about it, and I might go down sort of rabbit holes and get distracted and diverted off of other things if I didn't have something for me to concentrate on. And the other thing is that sometimes I can come across on the fly a little bit prescriptive or maybe brusquely, and it might make people feel like I'm dismissive of the pathways they've chosen. So I thought a prepared talk was just better all around. And it also gives me a transcript later to upload that you can just all then read back. So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. So my overall plan today is something like this. There'll be some biographical bits where I tell you a bit about myself. I need to give some context about my relationship to teaching secondary and my home educating journey. But more importantly is to tease out a bit from my own education and my own educational philosophy that has led me to want to talk about this topic today. So after I lay the groundwork of where I'm coming from, I want to talk about the well-traveled path versus some of the other choices out there that could be open to you if you, like me, have this gnawing feeling that there's something more to education than the norm. Is probably a good idea to have a notebook and a pen, because I'm going to probably say some things that you'll want to jot down some things as you go along, but obviously you can also come back and just look at the transcript later. Okay, obviously you're home educating already, so this is not a great leap for me to think that you are open to other pathways than the norm, right? Clearly you're already open to out of the box ideas, but there does seem to come this moment of doubt in all of our journeys where we second guess ourselves. The juncture where we either choose the well-trodden path because it's the most straightforward, because we don't know what options there are, because we think we have to do that. And I just want to use this talk to encourage you that you can be different, perhaps for the sake of your children. So I want to start now with a poem. I think you might be hearing my dogs barking in the background. I have delegated a team to take care of this, but I think he's not doing his job. So I apologize in advance for them. They want to be up with me, but they're too unreliable to be with me. So we've put them downstairs and they're not very happy. So I'm going to read a poem first. I think it will sum up some of the things I want to talk about, the basic foundation of this talk. It's by Robert Frost, who's an American poet, and it's called The Road Not Taken. It goes like this. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Those for that passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So this poem has been an influence on me for a long time, well before I even looked at homeschooling my kids, even before I had kids, when I was still at school and university myself. And it has sort of justified or helped me justify some of the off-piste decisions I've made in my own life. And though it's about someone who's standing at a crossroad before choosing the less traveled path, I think we home educators will come to a point in our journeys where we have many paths to take, not just two. So how do we navigate these choices? How do we choose? What happens if we goof it up and choose wrong? I know that's a fear as well. I don't know about you. I have these crises of confidence about once every few months. They're particularly bad over the summer, since that's when I'm trying to decide what we'll be studying for next year. It's particularly bad right now when things are kind of uncertain about the future. It also hits me when there are these big rites of passages, say moving from primary to secondary, going from middle to high school level stuff, when you get into exam season, all that kind of thing, and up until university and probably beyond. Anyway, it's always this kind of like, oh, here's a junction. What do I do? The hang of it is we as parents, we are in charge of this. It is our responsibility. That's the very foundation of our legal ability to home educate in the UK. We are responsible for our children's education. And even though we will no doubt include our teens in the decision-making processes at some point and in some way, the buck stops with us, and that is scary. So when we get to the crossroad moments, I think it's really helpful to have a plan or a vision, a destination, if you like. I mean, if you're planning a trip to the Lake District, and one day maybe we will be able to plan trips to the Lake District again, then you'll be looking at a map and you'll be deciding between the straight route via the motorway, or perhaps you're going to go one less direct, maybe because there's that huge snarl up at Warrington as usual, and so you want to avoid that. Maybe you have a National Trust card and you want to stop off at a property along the way. Maybe you want to swing by Castle Rig up near, what is it? I can't remember. The northern part of the lakes. Even if you're headed to Ambleside, you might take that roundabout route to go see that, because you're in the middle of studying ancient Britain and it's something that you'd like to see. If it isn't something that is immediately of interest to you, then maybe you wouldn't take that 4-hour diversion. We would weigh up the pros and cons of our choices. So that's what I'm going to be looking at now, deciding about the destination and the route to get there. All right, let's step back from metaphors for just a moment. The point is, we have a lot of choices, and sifting through those choices is our responsibility to do, and will often be based on our vision of our child's future, while perhaps being somewhat rooted in something from our own past. So here's the bio bit. Because my past plays really heavily in my decisions as I work out destinations for my kids. As I said at the beginning, I'm Dr. Kat Patrick. Currently, I'm the CEO of Dream Inspires Home Learning. That's a tutorial company that offers live online courses for home-educated teens worldwide. Our foundational philosophy is the Charlotte Mason method. If you haven't caught Leah's talk about this method, then I hope you'll circle back around to it later and watch her recording. I also examine for Cambridge in English language IGCSEs. I teach grammar courses for it. I wrote a revision guide for it, and I also mark literature A-levels. Now, the doctor in my name, that often confuses my students. In my introductory sessions, I always say, I am not an MD, I am a PhD in literary history. But I also did actually study medicine for the first 2 years of my university career. And what happened was, when it came to sign up for my modules for the 3rd year, it was required for me to do comparative anatomy. And in comparative anatomy, they always do a dissection of dead cats. And my cat had just died. I could not bring myself to sign up for that course. I had a crisis. And I decided to change from medicine to English literature and history, just like that. That was a huge a huge leap, medicine to English. And once I had moved to England, started teaching in that system and understanding more about the UK system, I became retrospectively afraid because of my experience for the future of my kids. That option to study medicine and change to English when I was 21 would unlikely have been open to me. I would have already cut all of my ties to my humanities when I was 16 and done A-levels in science and maths. But because I was a student in an American university, I was enjoying a really broad-based education. I burnt no bridges yet. So we don't so much specialize in America as emphasize. And I'll come back to this, so I will tell you a little bit that they take a whole bunch of modules, and ultimately all the modules count up to the bachelor's degree, but you'll have a specialism in there of about 35%. It's not a big specialism, it's kind of a little one, but nevertheless, you focus on something like English or pre-med or computer science for about 35–40% of your course, but the other 65% is a deliberate smorgasbord so that science students can write coherent essays, art students can appreciate logic, accuracy, and that sometimes there really are right and wrong answers. And I really appreciate that in hindsight. And it was when I was a secondary teacher at Headington Girls' School in Oxford that it first dawned on me how much of a luxury it was that I had that chance to switch at 21. It made me very ambivalent about the UK exam system. And then I determined for my own children that I was going to keep a broad base of study for them when we got to that point. So that's the first reason that I now encourage parents to keep the delight in their teens' studies. I'm scared for them. I don't want them so straitjacketed that they get stuck in studying what they don't love and then end up hating learning altogether. The other reason is I just don't really like exams that much. It may seem weird because I teach the GCSEs, the A-levels, I exam for CAIE, I run the grammar courses, wrote the guide for it. The honest truth is that I do these things to give home educators a shortcut so they can just get it over with. I want to free them up from all this revision for 2 years or whatever and say, look, you can do this a faster way. Dive in, study it, learn the game, take the test, get out of it, do something else. Focus on the good stuff. There's more to education than parroting back a revision guide and practicing and practicing and practicing those past papers. Home education has supposedly untethered us from these shackles. And even if your child is aiming for medicine at Oxbridge or vet school or whatever, there are ways to delight in the learning while reaching those goals. And I would argue there are sound, holistic reasons to continue with the broad-based education, even while honing down for the things that you feel your child needs or wants. So let's recap. It's possible to get burned by an education that specializes too much too early. It's a shame to lose the broad-based learning that helps nurture the whole person. On top of these more universal principles, we're in a crisis right now. The exam system was, it was a nightmare at this moment. How long will this nightmare go on? I don't know. Now more than ever, it might be the opportunity for the less trodden path. So once we've eliminated the popular path, which other one will we choose? Well, first of all, I believe you can't really choose until you know where you want to end up. This may change from year to year, but having a current vision of some kind will help you work backwards for the best path right now. Where is it that this child is going? What's the best way for the child to get there? For my kids, they have started cutting a sort of clear direction at different times in their teens. So forgive a little diversion here for some anecdotal chance to talk about my kids. Okay, so I have 4. They are within 6 years of each other. My eldest wanted to be a writer since we read a book about astronauts when she was 12 years old. This is very Charlotte Mason, to decide a career path for English when you're reading about an astronaut. All through secondary, we kept our studies broad in the morning, but we left afternoons free so the kids could pursue other things like musical instruments and art and crafts, playing outside. And this carved out time for her to pursue her writing passion. We also only ever schooled 4 days a week, but that's another topic altogether. She published her own books on Kindle. She read voraciously. She started her own business in editing and formatting books for other people, and is even now creating a big following on her Bookstagram profile, where she reviews YA titles, young adult titles. With her love of writing and her new business acumen, she accepted a place at a US university with the idea to specialize in writing and entrepreneurship. But take specialize loosely, remember, it's 35%, not the whole thing. So because of that, the other 65% is spread amongst other disciplines, and that's why her first term at university, she took a science module in astronomy. So they run these modules in semester blocks. After she completed that first block, the astronomy department contacted her and said, wouldn't you like to think about a double specialty in English and astronomy? Oh, I'm getting teary. That darn astronaut book, which we only read because she liked astronomy anyway. Well, we were reading at a time that she had both of those loves, and look at this. We didn't cut the cord for her love of astronomy, and now she is going to double specialize in English literature and astronomy, because we didn't burn the bridges when she was 16. So let's talk about my next child, a 17-year-old boy currently. He completely crashed his year 10, totally crashed year 10. He was unmotivated, he was unfocused, he didn't do his work like he was supposed to. You'd say, have you done your homework? He'd go, yes. Yes doesn't always mean yes with this boy. Sometimes it means go away. I'm busy doing something else. Anyway, something happened, and the next year he just sort of changed. Just grew up or something, I don't know. But he started to apply himself in his home studies, which he needed to do to convince me that I could allow him to start doing some modules at our local FE college, or community college it's called. One of them was that you have to pass Spanish 2 if you want to study Japanese at the FE college. Well, he did. So last term he was doing, actually this was autumn term, he did Japanese 1. And he wanted to, while he was there, he wanted to do a second course. So he tried to see what he could do that would fit in with the schedule. That also was kind of interesting to him. So he took electronic music, MIDI music composition. Oh my gosh. This boy, it was like he discovered treasure. It was like I finally plugged the electrical cord into the electrical outlet. And it was like, boom. He is the youngest in his classes, but he gets the top grades. He loves studying Japanese. He loves studying music composition. He wants to now be a music engineer, a producer, a composer. I'd never seen this side of him before. Yeah, he played his guitars. He taught himself on YouTube. He mucked about a bit with music. He liked to fiddle with the buttons on the sound system at church. He liked to do a bit of programming, play computer games, some animation. But to have a passion for something that may become a career? He's even started an Instagram account and is sharing his music. And he's quite a private chap. And he's saying, look at what I've done. It is a miracle. So my two younger kids, a girl 15, a boy 13. The 15-year-old right now, her main passion is swimming and trying to probably get into a U.S. university with a scholarship. But, you know, we've got a little issue with that right now because the swimming pools are open. But, you know, like I said, we're in a crisis. But academically, they're both leaning towards sciences. So I let my 15-year-old daughter sign up for 2 science courses this year, one with our local co-op and the other with Dreaming Spires. And then my son, he's not only taking general science at the co-op, but I opted for one of these monthly activity books that lets him, KiwiCo actually is the one that we use, where they send a box every month and he builds things. And then his telly time, he's doing Vsauce, Slow-Mo Guys, Smarter Every Day, these kinds of engineering type YouTube channels. For both of these, I feel like we're still in a sort of watch the space season. Those passions may change, but the passion itself is what excites me, that curiosity and desire to learn. Because here's the principle out of this related to, you know, my kids are kind of the lab experiments, but the principle is this. We will never teach our kids everything they need to know. When they get to 18, they're not done learning. Even if every waking moment we spent teaching, we'd only scratch the surface. Look at yourself. You're still learning as a home educating parent, aren't you? I've learned the coolest stuff. There's no end date for learning. I want to say that again because I want you to write that down. There is no end date to learning. When I was writing this and I was reading it over again, I thought maybe I might be giving you the wrong impression about what exactly I'm saying in relation to my kids. A lot in those anecdotes about self-directed learning may even suggest that I'm advocating unschooling, but that would be only part of the big picture. Let me sum it up this way. Delight-directed learning can be done in a lot of different ways. Ways that you choose for your own children and their individual desires, strengths, weaknesses. But I do think that there are probably 3 principles I'd recommend to keep in mind. First, stay broad in their studies. However that looks like, I can't say. For me, it's the Charlotte Mason method adapted to secondary school. It's perhaps a little less broad than one you'll find for under 14s, but it's still rich with great books and ideas and discussion and relationships. And the second one is to allow for some of that unschooling or masterly inactivity is one of the things that Charlotte Mason talks about. Those afternoons where you leave the children alone for exploration, whereas maybe morning was maybe a bit more structured or routine. And the third, and this is so crucial, and to me a huge oversight in so many teens' education, both in school and home educated. Keep at least some of the part of this relational with you. Be involved. Talk things over. Read books together aloud at night instead of letting everyone go to their rooms and do their TikTok or whatever. My heart aches for these children who are pointed to a huge pile of books and told, do that. The lack of buy-in by a parent must be soul destroying. Or at the least put a nagging doubt in a child's head that it's something like a chore that you have to do, that an adult doesn't bother with. If I were to put this back into our metaphor about choosing paths, this path would look something like this. It'll be full of delightful sights and sounds and smells and textures. This is your broad studies. There's a chance to meander off the path and explore things on their own. That's sort of the empty hours for the teens to fill with their own desires, their own projects. And the presence of a guide, that is you, who's on the journey with them, to whom the child can return with that froglet to show you, or the caterpillar, or a fresh picked wild apple that you can each take a bite from, or that dewdrop captured on a leaf. They need you to go, wow, that's cool. That's why I think it's so important to make sure our destination isn't about GCSEs or A-levels or university degrees, but about the journey of learning, learning to learn, being curious and nurturing. Nurture the curiosity. That's the ideal destination because it outlives the short years we have with them. It sets them up for what's to come. And you can travel toward this destination in 100 different ways. Remember the trip to the Lake District I talked about earlier? I mean, we talked about motorways and A roads, but why stop there? What about a train or a bike or a hot air balloon? What about a gigantic drone that can carry you because you've invented one? You're only limited by your imagination. It's the journey that feeds the curiosity. As an aside, this reminds me of the Ken Robinson TED Talk about changing paradigms in education, where studies show that younger kids have more imaginative solutions to things that older kids have been educated out of and educated into conformity. I think it's worth a watch, and if you haven't watched it recently, watching it again and reminding yourself about how we have options. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's bad to take the motorway. I mean, assuming the motorway, we're understanding I'm talking about exams. I would never advise anyone not to do them at all, especially if there are compelling reasons to do so. I do think, and I think this really strongly, that they should not be the only focus. They can be so prescriptive, and there are so many other ways to enjoy better learning opportunities. And I'm assuming that you're here to learn more about this. Otherwise, why would you pick this session, right? You probably know intuitively there's something more, and perhaps have come to find out what options there are. I can't cover all of them because there are as many pathways as you can imagine, but let's say for the sake of argument, we'll look at some of the popular ones. I'm in the last third of the talk, by the way. First, the pathway where students take some exams. Perhaps you undertake only a few of them while putting more effort into enjoyable and stimulating projects along the way. Also, choosing wisely. Some exams are currently so bloated that their syllabi requires 3 years of study to get through everything, not to mention all the hoops you have to jump to answer the exam questions. Is that a good use of one's learning? If you could simply forego the exam and study the subject for its own sake, making your own connection from one era to another, being inspired by a leader or a revolutionary or someone's simple, gentle character, someone who didn't make the exam syllabus because impact wasn't part of the exam's agenda. Another consideration when choosing which exams to take and which to study for enjoyment instead is whether or not it's a sensible exam or a complicated exam or one that requires too many hoops or has poor outcomes. I actually have in mind the ICT exam. There will be others, and syllabuses are changing all the time. What is it about the ICT exam? I'm sure there are good centers out there. There are justifiable reasons to do this sometimes, but I also hear nightmares about incompetent centers who over and over again don't provide the proper facilities. That means it's not only stressful and nightmarish experience for the students, but the grades seem to come back pretty underwhelming. So weigh up the costs of something like this. I don't just mean monetary costs. I mean all the other kind of costs. The time it took, what you get out of it, the stress you get from doing it. Third, there are other activities and programs that are counted as qualification equivalents like the art award or music grades. I always found the art awards really stimulating. When my daughter did hers, she composed a piece of violin music called Murmurations, and then she made this 3D sculpture out of like basket weaving and origami birds. In fact, we were so impressed by it, it got its own box in the international move to come over here. And I meant to have it with me. I forgot to go get it from her room to show you. Anyway, it was that precious that we put it in our container to come over here. And there are new qualifications that are appearing all the time, but they also disappear too. So you need to undertake these with some caution. Make sure there's a longevity to them. Then there are qualifications like national foreign language exams that you can take from the French government or the Spanish government. They may not be accepted as UCAS points, but they're internationally recognized for language proficiency, and arguably they carry more weight in the working world. Maybe that would be better than GCSEs, I don't know. Okay, another thing, more and more home educators are turning to the broad-based American system and the US SATs, not SATs. SATs, I'll talk a bit more about what they are in just a second, but this is an alternative route to UK university. There's a whole Facebook group about this. It's called HE Success Without UK Exams, where parents have done this are on hand to give advice about the process. I know there are a number of you who came along today specifically to hear more about this. I'll be brief here, and if you want me to tease out more about this in the Q&A, I'd be happy to. So the US system bypasses GCSEs altogether. That doesn't mean you can't choose to do some anyway. Remember, this is your path. Basically, you spend about 4 years studying a broad-based curriculum and you keep a portfolio of grades. I have a video about how to do this on YouTube, and I've put the link at the bottom of my transcript here. Sometimes toward the end of 4 years, you register for the US SAT exams. Most universities so far seem to want the general one and 3 subject ones, but there are variations on this. Shirley Vels gave a talk about this last year, and she also has a blog about it, and she's on that Facebook group, HE Success Without UK Exams. So she will be contactable to find out more. So SATs are multiple choice exams. They are taken on a single Saturday at a center, and there are many centers around the UK. Each one costs about £100 or less, and they're accepted as equivalents to A-levels in terms of university acceptance. So for £400 and 1 or 2 Saturdays, you can tick off your exam boxes while having enjoyed a broader and probably more satisfying course of study in the meantime. You'll need to do some revision for these SATs, but the good news is there are revision books and each revision course, and even revision courses like Khan Academy that will coach the child to the answers. So it's often not really an indication of their knowledge, but the mastery of the game. I don't have a problem with this. The real learning happened in all those other 4 years when the subjects could be studied holistically and realistically and relationally and in context. And these other things are just something you kind of bump in, get the knowledge, practice, take it, and you're done. Okay, finally, a last route to university that a lot of people don't think about, I want to touch on, is that of a mature student. A mature student is classified, as far as I understand, as young as 21. So you can see all the possibilities a young adult could explore and enjoy prior to that. They could have a job, they could volunteer, they could go on missions, they could run a business, they could look into entrepreneurship. And all these experiences are valid elements of a university application, perhaps even obviating the need for exams at all. That will depend on, of course, on the subject that one wants to study. But you can imagine a young person who wants to do drama at university, and maybe instead of going straight to university, this person goes and has a job in the theater and works in the theater for 3 years or something, then applies for a university course in drama. And then that is one way of having enjoyed your studies and learned on the job. Now, I'm not versed enough in other vocational options like apprenticeships to make comment here, but maybe someone in attendance could speak to these toward the end of the session. But one thing's for sure, there's almost certainly a Facebook group that will help you discover the myriad options that one could choose from, at least once the well-trodden exam pathway is seen as only one among many. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't put in a brief plug here for the online courses we teach at Dream Inspires. As people plan their pathways, there are usually some subjects a student either loves so much or that a parent has less confidence in teaching, where you might want to seek out a tutor and be a guide rather than yourself. There are a lot of other tutors, there are a lot of other ways of doing this, but I want to just bring up the way that we do it because we're subject specialists. We have a passion for our subjects. We use living books to inspire our students to think and discuss and connect, and we very much welcome any of your teens who would like to join us for a course or two. And we do take them from as young as year 7. Perhaps you've already been a part of our family and may want to speak to the kind of impact that we've had on your children already. We're also going to have a virtual meetup tomorrow for Dreaming Spires people. It's for current and past families and also for future families if you want to come to that. It's at 5 p.m. UK time on the Whova app if anyone wants to come and talk further about our courses. I also want to direct you to my colleagues' talks in the Learn Free conference. In fact, Joel is giving his right now at the same time. So you can go back and watch his video. He is talking about living ways to learn foreign language. And then Jenny Wells did one yesterday about lighting a fire and not filling a bucket, which was particularly speaking to SEN students and trying to inspire them. Both of these would be great for watching back later. Now, as I come to the end, I want to recap. Your teens are at a stage of exploration and discovery, and it's your responsibility to help them through it. I believe the destination during secondary home education should be learning to learn, so that when they do find their passion, they'll have the curiosity and the tools and the skills and the mindset to help them nurture it. To that end, there are many, many, many pathways to achieve that goal, and it's my belief that the well-worn path of focusing solely on UK exams is less satisfying and stimulating than one that makes at least some room for beautiful scenery and exploration. In closing, I want to say that these ideas that come, yes, from my own personal experience, from my professional experience, and even from my fears, but also from observing home educators over the years who frankly freak out about secondary school and so many times give up their lovely family journey of learning together to put the teen into school, or if not into school, then do school at home situations. If you've done this already, I'm not trying to guilt you in that you did it, but I'm trying to encourage those that are coming up behind us that there are other options, and I want them to know there are other options. And I think they should think very seriously about these other options. There are alternatives to this that are just as good, if not better. Don't be afraid to choose the road less traveled by, and I do believe it will make all the difference. So thank you, everybody. That's the end of my talk. And now I'm happy to open up the discussion to question and answers, but also talking about your journey that you've traveled that maybe is less traveled by, or what you think might be the direction you're thinking of going. So I think now it's the moderators are going to help me.
Yes, Kat, so we don't have a lot of time. So it's now 4:45. I have to open another session at 5. So if we just have some really burning questions, and Kat is everywhere, all over the app. So you will find her. Yeah. And just to say that Joel's session is on Monday. So he's still coming.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's
right. It's against my other session. It's against my Reluctant Rider session. Yes, sorry about that.
So it's not right now. So does anyone have a burning question? Raise your hand or make yourself known. I'll enable chat as well. Okay, so if you want to use the chat, but we don't have a lot of time, so I do suggest you go and
sorry about that, Juliet.
On the Dreaming Spires group too. If you want to talk to her afterwards. Okay, Lewis family.
So Kat, what kind of age, if we were going to jump into the American system, what sort of age would you want to start doing those kind of building up to the SATs?
Well, in the American system, it starts at what you call year 10. And that's the format they do it, those 4 years. My own children started a little bit earlier than that, but it was just because we were trying to gather a huge feast of things, and it just turned out that way. Most people will take the SATs probably the October before. Well, I don't know. I think you'll have to ask the people who've done it because timetables are different, and with university entries being earlier in the UK. So it might be something like spring of their year 12, I would think, is maybe when you would aim to do that. You might even aim to do October of year 12 to do the general, and maybe one specialty exam, and then maybe two other specialty exams, whatever. Subject exams is what they're really called, in the spring of year 12. So then if you're, I'd work backwards then. I'd think about starting in year 9.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mary Grace. Where are you,
Hey,
Mary
Mary.
Grace?
Hello. I'm here.
Okay.
I was just wondering, if you don't necessarily intend, if the child doesn't intend to go to university and they do the SATs, would any employers recognise it as anything? If you know what I mean.
Well, the way I look at this is that if an American student moves to Britain and applies for a job or something, they only have SATs and a portfolio, so it doesn't stop them from getting jobs. So I think you may have to educate the employer and things like that, but because it is an international qualification, sometimes the employer just has to say, oh, okay, they have well, it would be the same, a foreign student as well coming in without GCSEs and A-levels. So there is, I think there is leeway for that, because otherwise it's cutting off the opportunities for most of the world to get jobs in Britain.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, anyone else with a question? I don't see any other hands. That was lovely, Kat. I really enjoyed that. And so please go and find Kat. She's got lots of time for people. I've noticed that about her. And we just want to say a big thank you.
It's also early in the day for me, so
yes,
I have
bright
all day to answer things.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed you are.
Yeah.
Anyway, so for anyone who wants to give me any feedback or just catch up on anything that just stay in the loop, 5 o'clock I'll have a quick Zoom session. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Juliet. Thanks for doing this.